And Krishna's in Vrindavan. He's 6 years old. Poganda age has just begun. And a little bit about Krishna's Poganda age. It comes up in the verses. I'm just going to read a few pages from Krishna Sandarbha. Krishna Sandarbha is Jiva Goswami's description of Krishna as the original personality of Godhead. He writes, in Krishna's manifest pastimes in Vraja, he grew to the age of Kaishora, or 15 years old. But at that age, he left Vraja to go to Mathura. This is confirmed by the following verse from Bhagavatam 10:44-8, where the audience in Kamsa's wrestling arena in Mathura describes Krishna and Balaram as being in the age of Kaishora. Quote, Mushtaka and Chanara are just like thunderbolts as strong as great mountains, and Krishna and Balaram are two delicate boys of tender age who have not even reached the age of Yovana, or 16, which means he was 15, or Kaishora. Next, that Sri Krishna was in the last part of his Kaishora period, 15 years, when he entered Mathura is confirmed by the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:45-3, where Lord Krishna says to Vasudeva and Devaki, quote, my dear father and mother, although you have always been very anxious for the protection of our lives, you could not enjoy the pleasure of having us as your babies, Balya, as your growing boys, Poganda, and as your adolescent youths, Kaishora. So he's now on the transition between Kaishora and Yovana, or 15, almost 16. Next. This is important. We may note that although Krishna entered Mathura at the conclusion of his Kaishora age, parentheses, the stage of adolescence, which generally occurs at the end of the 15th year, Krishna only remained in Vrindavan for 11 years. Sri Krishna's 11 year stay in Vrindavan is confirmed in the following statement of Srimad Bhagavatam 3:26. This is Uddhava speaking. Uddhava says, thereafter, his father, being afraid of Kamsa, brought him to the cow pastures of Maharaj Nanda, and there he lived for 11 years, like a covered flame with his elder brother Baladev. And then, so how do we understand? Two references say he was 15, one reference say he was 11. Here's the answer. From this statement, we may understand that Lord Krishna grew up more quickly than an ordinary child, and he attained the full age of Kaishora, which generally takes 15 years to attain in 11 years. Got it? Oh, it's interesting. I'll just step back and say, I've been trying to understand Krishna's different ages during different pastimes. And one answer is there's not a lot of information about what age he was. There's a lot of information about the pastimes and not so much about what age he was. And even with the age he was, here's this conflict. He was 11. Confirmed by Uddhava. He knows how old he was. But it's also he was 15. So he matured quickly. He looked like 15. He acted like 15. His bodily features were 15. His mind was like 15, but his age was 11. So he was 11. Or even more specifically, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says he was 10 years, 7 months. And he even gets down, what day of the month, what phase of the moon, etc. Here. This is from Brihat Bhagavatamrita, 3.3.136. Earlier in Brihad Bhagavatamrita 2.1.309, it is described that the Kumara age lasts till the 5th year, Poganda from 6 to 10, and Kaishora from 11 to 15. From the 16th year is Yovana. However, in the case of Krishna, the ages appear earlier than usual. Krishna does not advance to Yovana even after leaving Vrindavan. He stays eternally Kaishora or 11. We often hear 16. The Kumara age lasts till the 5th year. The Kumara age lasts till the 5th year. Then Poganda age starts. According to the Bhagavatam 10:13:37, the killing of Aghasura. How old is Krishna when that happened? The killing of Aghasura, then 1 year passed, right? When he was the calves and cowherd boys. So he was just around 4, because when that 1 year passed, he was just around 5. So according to that, the killing of Aghasura and the bewilderment of Brahma took place before Krishna entered his Poganda age. So he was still 4 to 5. But it was reported by the cowherd boys 1 year later when Krishna reached the Poganda age. However, it should also be considered that Krishna covered those ages more quickly than normal. Thus, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavatam 10:45:3. Listen. At the age of 3 years and 4 months, Krishna displayed the qualities of a 5-year-old. So the 3 years, 4 months marks when they moved from Gokul to Vrindavan forest. 3 years, 4 months, he was looking like and acting like 5-year-old. During this Kumara age, although he's only 3 years, 4 months, he's entered the Kumara age, Krishna stayed in Mahavan. From that time to age 6 years, 8 months, during this Poganda age, he stayed in Vrindavan. So this Dhenukasura pastime takes place during his Poganda stage. From 6 years, 8 months till his 10th year, he experienced Kaishora age while living in Nandishvara. In the 7th month of the 10th year, during the month of Chaitra, on the Krishna Trayodasi, he went to Mathura, and on the Chaturdasi, he killed Kamsa. 10 years, 7 months. Therefore, the 10th year was the end of his Kaishora age, although it's normally the transition between 15 and 16. Got it? Should I do it again? Yes, do it again. In one sense, it's not important. In another sense, it's important. It's nice. It's nice to meditate on Krishna's pastimes. He matured early, and it's described elsewhere. Maybe it's here in this quote also. Even when children start to crawl, there's a whole big section in that chapter 6, I think it is, chapter 6 or 7. Krishna and Balaram are starting to crawl. And when does a child start to crawl? There's a certain age, a common age. They did it way ahead of time. And then they move from crawling to standing and toddling. There's a certain age. And Krishna and Balaram did it much earlier. So they just matured earlier. Their bodies and their everything. I'm reading this or thinking about it, meditating on it, because this is chapter 15. It's very specific. Krishna turned 6. And when he turned 6, he entered his Poganda age, like everybody else in Vrindavan understood. And he graduated from calves to cows. And then along with 2 other things. His relationship with Balaram shifted from just being pals or friends to he's the older brother. So Balaram starts taking on the older brother role a little bit. It becomes more pronounced in Dwarka. But here we're not even in Dwarka yet, we're not even in Mathura yet. He's just starting in that stage. And then another is his interest in girls. The gopis. And, he's 6 years old. But he's behaving like he's 10. Or, anyway, because there's another number of years and he's only 11, but he's behaving like he's 15. Okay, so 3 years, 4 months, he completed his childhood, or Kaishora. When they moved, it was 3 years, 4 months. Normally a boy is still in his Kaishora period until he turns 6. But Krishna already turned from Kaishora, to Kumara age. Yeah. During his Kumara age, Krishna stayed in Mahavan. Kumara age, that's in the Mahavan, the eastern side. From that time to the age 6, during his Bhaganda age, he stayed in Vrindavan. From 6 and 8 months until 10th year, he experienced Kaishore age while living in Nandishwara. In the 7th month of the 10th year, during the month of Chaitra, on the Krishna Trayodashi, he went to Mathura, and on the Chaturdashi, he killed Kamsa. Therefore, the 10th year was the end of his Kaishore age, but thereafter he remained at the same age. Here's another reference from Brihat Bhagavatamrita. It is generally understood that the Kaishora period of youth, the Kaishora period begins in one's 11th year. According to Vedic injunctions, Kshatriyas, in particular, are supposed to receive their sacred thread initiation in the 11th year. So Krishna was 10 years, 7 months. He went to Mathura, killed Kamsa. Ugrasena was placed on the throne, and that's when he got his thread, his Upanayana, from Gargamuni, when he was almost 11, which was standard for Kshatriyas. And so it was that Krishna and Balaram took initiation at that age, right after killing Kamsa, so it wasn't quite yet 11. In the arena, after Kamsa's death, Krishna told Sri Vasudeva and Devaki, because of us, your 2 sons, you always remained in anxiety and could never enjoy our childhood, boyhood, and youth. So Balya, Poganda, and Kaishora. Balya, Poganda, Kaishora. So up to 5, 6 to 10, 10 to 15. Balya, Poganda, Kaishora. Although Krishna and Balaram had just entered the Kaishora age, the supreme heroic prowess they were showing in Mathura covered the natural charm of their youth. Thus, Vasudeva and Devaki were not able to experience the sweetness of the boys in their adolescence. In other words, although Krishna's beauty is described as that of a full-grown youth, this does not mean that he had passed beyond the Kishore age. There's two perspectives: what his actual age was and what he looked like, and how he was conducting himself. He was acting like he was older than his age. As an alternative explanation of Krishna's statements to his parents, we can accept that when Krishna and Balaram came to Mathura, they were actually at the end of the Kaishore age, 10 years, 10 years, 7 months. Or it was just before they were 15. The poetry of Sri Bilvamangala Thakur gives evidence that in some of the later pastimes before leaving Vrindavan, Krishna manifested the symptoms of a full-grown youth and even acted as an adult. A child may act like an adult by displaying some special strength or skill. The 15th year is especially attractive because at that age the body reaches adulthood at its peak of youthful beauty. Again, but because Krishna was supremely gentle by nature, his 15th year seemed like the beginning of his Kaishora period. And his period of debt for enjoying Nanda Maharaj's milk products is still calculated as only 11 years, since for the first 4 years he was an infant sucking his mother's breast. So there's 3 different perspectives on the same thing from Sanatana Goswami. In this way we can reconcile the contradictions that seem to appear among the various statements, some saying he was new adolescent and other full-grown youth. So he was, in summary, he was 11 when he entered Mathura, and he was 6 when he took the cows. He was 6 when he started herding the cows. He was 3 years, 4 months when he started herding the calves. When he passed his 5th year, he started herding the cows. And that's what is chapter 15. That's why I read it, because it comes up in the verses of chapter 15. Now, we all know, everybody here I'm sure knows, the Dhenukasura Leela, and there's a very beautiful, further detailed description with some changes in Garga Samhita. Garga Samhita. One day, while herding his many beautiful Surabhi cows with the Gopas, and this is not a word for word, this is a written in, nice English. It's not just a cut and paste of the translation of the texts. Sri Krishna approached the newly blossoming Talavan forest. The land was even, smooth, and expansive, while the earth was black, covered with dorva grass, and full of ripe fruits. Out of fear of the demon Dhenuka, the Gopas were reluctant to enter, and even Sri Krishna stayed at the outskirts of the forest. Balaramji, who is the fearless resort of all living entities, tightened his blue sash on his waist and callously entered the forest to collect its ripe fruit. At that time, the demon Dhenukasura, who was a friend of Kamsa, happened to be taking a midday nap. When he heard the sound of falling fruits, he became filled with anger and appearing in the form of an ass, came before Balaram. Without any warning, he violently kicked his chest, Balaram's chest, with his hind legs. Sri Balaram, smiling with the cooling effulgence of 100 moons, began to chase Dhenuka around the forest. Catching the ass by his hind legs, he playfully threw him into a tall tree, which collapsed and made other trees also topple. Looking around, Sri Balaram was very pleased with the decorative damage to the forest. When the demon rushed toward him for the second time, he caught Dhenuka and, whirling him above his head like a lotus, he threw him a distance of 8 miles. Now remember, he's 6 years old. After Dhenuka lost consciousness, he very shortly regained his ass senses and, manifesting a terrifying form with 4 horns, he began to chase the gopas. As Dhenuka chased the cowherd boys, angry Sridham hit him with a stick. Subal hit him with his fist. Stoka Krishna whipped him with a rope. And Arjun and Angshu caught him together and threw him a great distance. Because the boys were the associates of Sri Krishna, by his grace, they were possessed of all his own potencies. Paragraph. While he was lying on the ground, Vishal and Rishabh kicked the demon and called him foul names. Tejasvi jumped on him and tried to strangle him. Devaprastha slapped him on the cheeks, and meek Varutapa threw his ball at him. Bewildered at the fierce attack of these simple cowherd boys, Dhenuka stood up, only to be grabbed with both hands by Sri Krishna, whirled around mercilessly while the cowherd boys clapped. He was thrown through the air onto Govardhan Hill. Now we heard, at least in the Bhagavatam and the commentary, where is the Tal forest? And it gets very specific. It's 1 yojana west of Mathura and 1 yojana east of Govardhan. So it's kind of in the middle. There's 16 miles in between, or 2 yojanas in between. It's kind of in the middle. This way is Govardhan. This way is Govardhan, and that way is Mathura. It's in the middle. So they threw him, Balaram threw him 8 miles. And now Krishna threw him 8 miles. He landed on Govardhan Hill. By the force of this attack, the demon lost consciousness for over an hour. This is Garga Samhita. After regaining his senses, he uprooted Govardhan Hill and threw it at Sri Krishna. Govinda playfully caught Giriraj and threw him at Dhenukasura's head. At this time, Balaram grabbed the demon with both hands, threw him to the ground, and then punched him with his fist. With that punch, the demon breathed his last, and the demigod showered flowers and glorified Krishna Balaram with music and songs. In his last life, he was the son of Bali Maharaj. Now other versions say he was the son of Bali Maharaj's son. And while foolishly enjoying the company of many women on Gandhamandana mountain, he was cursed by Durvasa Muni to become an ass. Because Sri Krishna had promised given Prahlad Maharaj the benediction that he would never kill his descendants, it was arranged that the demon be killed by the lotus hand of Sri Balaram. At Dhenuka's death, all the cows and gopas, their hearts filled with love, surrounded Sri Krishna and sang his glories with tear-filled eyes. This kirtan, cheering, and happy spirit prevailed until the boys triumphantly entered Vrindavan. Krishna's hair was decorated with peacock feathers, flowers, and the dust raised by the cows. While he blissfully played his flute, all his associates sang his glories and celebrated the death of Dhenukasura. Now there's a whole section that's not described here, and that's, the killing of his associates. And in the, we're beginning, some people like to follow along, 10:15:41 translation. The lotus-eyed Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories are most pious to hear and chant, returned home to Braja with his elder brother Balaram. Along the way, the cowherd boys, his faithful followers, chanted his glories. And the BBT purport, one sentence. When the glories of Sri Krishna are vibrated, both the speakers and the hearers are purified and become pious. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary, entering the village after leaving the forest is described in 3 verses. Krishna, who attracted the hearts of all the inhabitants of Braja, who had lotus petal eyes to attract both the eyes and nostrils, whose flute songs are good fortune for the ears, glorified by the cowherd boys, entered Braja. Jiva Goswami writes, having told an incidental story, the killing of Dhenuka, from another day, the description now returns to the evening pastimes on the first day of herding the cows. 6 verses describe the evening pastime. A description of the general devotees of Braja as they gazed at their boys is given. By mentioning Krishna, how he attracted everyone's heart is indicated. This is particularized in the words following. His eyes, like lotus petals, indicate his beauty. He manifested a little of Kaishora beauty with redness at the tips of the eyes and with the length and width of the eyes. Because he is endowed with all good qualities and actions, hearing about him and glorifying him produces auspiciousness, punya shravana kirtana. This means that by hearing about him, the people of Braja diminished their pain of separation and gave bliss to those around them. After pointing out his beauty, the verse describes the beauty of his followers surrounding him. We're getting a picture. I mean, if you were an artist, you would be creating a picture on it. It's just a picture with words. Sanatana Goswami. Having told an incidental story, the killing of Dhenuka, from another day, the description now returns to the pastimes on the first day of herding the cows. Or the pastimes in Taliban occurred on the first day of herding cows, since there is no words like, one day this happened. Paragraph. At the end of Kartik month, the ripe tal fruits are most abundant. But all seasons take shelter in Vrindavan. Because of the nature of the place, an eastern wind occurs in order to have rain in autumn. Krishna alone is mentioned since he is the prominent person. Generally, he is the chief person in the pastimes. Also, he was most eager to enter Braja and wanted to give special bliss to everyone there. He also thought of joyfully meeting the gopis who would come in front to see him. Again, this is Poganda. He's just 6, but he is manifesting older than Poganda. It marks a transition. But he's ahead of his age. Krishna is he who attracts everyone's heart. He is described His lotus eyes indicated his beauty. Chanting and hearing his glories is auspicious. This indicates the greatness of his qualities and actions. By hearing that, the pain of separation was relieved for the general populace, and joy produced for the gopis. He desired to reveal his form and qualities to the people of Braja by his arrival there. He was praised by cowherds and others following behind, showing his form and qualities, particularly the killing of Dhanaka that day. This way, both Krishna and the gopis could attain complete sight of each other. Or, he was praised by cowherds like Sri Dam, who were naturally his followers out of friendship. Those from Braja were in front, and other friends were there as well. While praising Krishna, they walked. Shukadev, on the bank of the Ganga, had at this point developed a vision of being a member of Braja. He's achieving perfection by describing Krishna's pastimes. He's heard Krishna. There's 9 processes of bhakti, and one is speaking, Shravanam Kirtanam. So Sanatana Goswami is cluing us in. He's becoming Brajabasi eyes just by speaking, and so we're becoming Brajabasi eyes just by hearing, or different paces of becoming spiritualized, but that's the process. Another thing that's described from chapter 8, because there's a lengthy description of childhood pastimes, and Krishna's coming back at the end of the day. Well, when he's taking care of the calves, a condition that Nanda Maharaj gave was, you have to come back for lunch. So when he would come back, Krishna had already done something wonderful, and the nature of life in Vrindavan, we know from Brahma Samhita, every step is a dance and every word is a song. So they would come back singing. And they would be singing the glories of Krishna, what he did that day, and everything. And they're singing, and they weren't musicians. They didn't go to music school or something. But they just were singing and singing and singing. And when they got home, the parents would want to hear, and they hear their songs, and the parents would compose their songs, and they were singing and singing. And it's the Brijbasi life. Very musical. And joy-filled. There was feelings of separation, and then feelings of meeting. And feelings of separation, and feelings... The waves of rasa were continually churning and moving, and in one wave intersecting with another wave and splashing, and it's waves of bhakti rasa that's our acharyas are enjoying churning. Here's Jiva Goswami in Priti Sandarbha, Anuchhed 7. The relation of the cowherds to material objects was not for themselves, but for service to the Lord. There's 3 verses from chapter 14. This is Brahma's prayers. What, O Lord, what can you give to the people of Braja, whose houses, possessions, friends, dear ones, bodies, sons, life, heirs, hearts, are dedicated only to you, since there is nothing superior to you, or Braja, which you have already given them. Chapter 16, they had offered him themselves, their friends, their wealth, their families, and goals of life. And this chapter 15's later verse, no, it's this verse, lotus-eyed Krishna, whose glories are most auspicious to hear and chant, returned home to Braja with his elder brother Balaram, praised by the cowherd boys who followed behind. So commentary, Although it appears that the relation between the Yadus and Pandavas with Krishna is for their benefit, that is only in appearance. What's the reality? Chapter 90 of Canto 10. The Brishnis were so absorbed in Krishna that they forgot their own bodies while sleeping, sitting, walking, conversing, playing, bathing, and so on. Or Canto 1, Chapter 12. Did these things give joy to the king, whose mind was only fixed on Mukunda, without deviation and nothing else? Now that's text 41 from chapter 15. Here's text 42. And that's it for this evening. Translation. So this is Krishna's form coming back. Lord Krishna's hair, powdered with the dust raised by the cows, was decorated with a peacock feather and forest flowers. The Lord glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute while his companions chanted his glories. The gopis, all together, came forward to meet him, their eyes very eager to see him. Now remember his age, but he's maturing at a younger age, and already he's all attractive to the young gopis. Purport. Superficially, the gopis were young, married girls, and therefore they would naturally be ashamed and fearful of casting loving glances at a beautiful young boy like Sri Krishna. But Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all living beings are his eternal servants. Thus, the gopis, although the most pure-hearted of all great souls, did not hesitate to come forward and satisfy their love-struck eyes by drinking in the sight of beautiful young Krishna. The gopis also relished the sweet sound of his flute and the enchanting fragrance of his body. Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, in this verse, the young girls of Braja are described in particular. The gopis approached him, whose locks of hair was covered with dust raised from the cow's hooves, who was decorated with forest flowers and peacock feather, who had attractive glance and smile. Another meaning is, his glance emitted a beautiful smile. The gopis' eyes had a desire to see Krishna. The eyes could not follow the order of the gopis, who wanted to give up watching him because of their shame. Becoming independent and jealous of the ears hearing Krishna's flute and the nostrils smelling its fragrance, the eyes gave up the shelter of the gopis and went to Krishna by themselves in order to gain the treasure of Krishna. All the women came out from their houses and began to go toward Krishna while saying to their husbands, are you going to stop me or kill me? Vishwanath. Jiva Goswami writes, 2 verses describe how the young cowherd girls who had grown beyond childhood particularly gazed at him. This suggests the appearance of their attraction for him. The description of his head starts from the top and proceeds downwards. Although he wore other garments and ornaments, they are not described. Those items which were particularly used in going into the forest are described. He played his flute to attract them and give them joy. This happened naturally with the flute, but Krishna particularly made this his goal. His glories were sung by his followers as they sang along with the melody of his flute, which produced songs based on ragas. Balaram is not mentioned in this verse, since it would not be suitable for him to share Krishna's Madhurya Rasa. because of separating on some pretext, Krishna's nature without his brother became prominent even in the presence of elders. There are 3 indications of his coming to Braja. 1, the dust rising from the cows. 2, playing his flute. And 3, the praise by his followers. The gopis had eyes which desired to see him. This indicates their eyes independently developed this desire. That indicates their deep anuraga. They developed some anxiety from seeing the first dust in the distance. His return from herding cows was later than previously. Previously he was with calves. Now he's with the cows, so he's out longer. Right, it's really nice. Out of eagerness they gathered together, since they were of one mind, in friendship, and their shame and fear disappeared in a group, and since they all ran from their houses simultaneously to the place where Krishna would come, or to a high place where they had previously gathered. And Sanatana Goswami writes, 2 verses speak of the gopis and Krishna's bliss on seeing each other as Krishna returns in the evening dressed in his forest costume. Kuntala means hair or locks of hair. Ikshanam means glancing. His beauty from head to foot is described. Though other ornaments may be there, these are the chief ornaments of his evening forest dress, and are selected because they are the most beautiful. He plays his flute to attract them and give them joy. This happened naturally with the flute, but Krishna particularly made this his goal. Close by, and with flute accompaniment, he was praised with songs glorifying him for killing Dhanuka. There was only one cause for the gopis' eagerness to see him. That he was returning was known by the dust raised by the cows, his flute playing, and glorification by his followers. The gopis were those who had surpassed childhood. Paragraph. On some pretext, Balaram followed behind in order that the gopis could enjoy the younger brother without restriction. The reason for their coming is mentioned. Their eyes desired to see him. Jadrikshata because of various worries that arose from seeing the dust from far off. His coming was delayed more than when he herded the calves. The gopis gathered together, samita, because they could be without fear or shame, or because they were friends, or individually ran from their houses in haste and arrived in the path at the same time, or previously had gathered together out of pain of separation. Two more sections. This is Priti Sandarbha and then Brihat Bhagavatamrita, and that's it for this evening. Jiva Goswami is going to describe the term Anubhava, and he's going to use this pastime and others to help explain it. Here's an example of the Anubhavas in the queens, and then he goes to the gopis. So, Anubhava in the queens. 2 verses. Chapter 59, text 44 and 45. Although those women obtained as their husband, the husband of the goddess of fortune, although even great devatas like Brahma do not know how to approach him, with ever-increasing pleasure they experience loving attraction for him, exchanging smiling glances with him, and reciprocated with him in ever-fresh intimacy, replete with joking and feminine shyness. Although the Supreme Lord's queens each had hundreds of maidservants, they chose to personally serve the Lord by approaching him humbly, offering him a seat, worshiping him with excellent paraphernalia, bathing and massaging his feet, giving him betel nut to chew, fanning him, anointing him with fragrant sandalwood paste, adorning him with flower garlands, dressing his hair, arranging his bed, bathing him, and presenting him with various gifts. The Anubhavas of the gopis are given. This is from chapter 47, first one. Chapter 47 is Uddhava's visit to Braja. The gopis of Vrindavan have given up the association of their husbands, sons, and other family members who are very difficult to give up, and they have forsaken their relatives and the path of Dharma to obtain the lotus feet of Mukunda Krishna, which even the Vedas pursue. Oh, let me be fortunate enough to be one of the bushes, creepers, or herbs in Vrindavan, because the gopis bless them with the dust of their lotus feet. Celebrated verse from Uddhava. And commentary. Krishna's hair, covered with the dust raised by the cows, was decorated with a peacock feather and forest flowers. He glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute. While his companions chanted his glories, the young gopis all together came forward to meet him, their eyes very eager to see him. And then quotes the verse. This one, and then the next one. With cup-like eyes, the women of Vrindavan drank the honey of the beautiful face of Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission, and he, completely accepting these glances as a proper offering of respect, entered his house in the village. So up to this point, in his childhood pastimes and youth pastimes, we don't hear so much about the gopis, just the hints coming. It's a pretty strong hint. Chapter 15. And last, this is Brihat Bhagavatamrita. 35127. The Lord disposed of Danika and his relatives in the Talavan and met at dusk with the women of Braja. These pastimes I cannot adequately praise. I can only offer them my respects. Commentary. Because the cowherd boys wanted to eat the fruits of the tall trees and play with them as balls, they asked Krishna and Balaram to rid the Talavan forest of the ass demons who refused to allow anyone to enter, and Krishna and Balaram did so. After such sports, when Krishna came home in the evening, at the entrance of Nanda Maharaj's village, he would be greeted by his family and friends, including the young gopis. Now here's these two verses again. Quote, Lord Krishna's hair, powdered with the dust raised by the cows, was decorated with a peacock feather and forest flowers. The Lord glanced charmingly and smiled beautifully, playing upon his flute. While his companions chanted his glories, the gopis all together came forward to meet him, their eyes very eager to see him. And with their bee-like eyes, the women of Vrindavan drank the honey of the beautiful face of Lord Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission, and Sri Krishna, completely accepting these glances as a proper offering of respect, entered the cowherd village. And the final paragraph, commentary. Narada is narrating all of this to Gopakumar. Narada feels unable to describe such intimate exchanges between Krishna and his devotees, either because words are incapable of capturing the essence of these pastimes, or because Narada fears that if he says more than a few words about each pastime, he'll become too ecstatic and lose control of himself. Now, therefore, unable to freely offer elaborate service to these pastimes, he simply offers them obeisances with his words. I have a very clear memory of the first time visiting Vrindavan. It was, I think, 1974, because Prabhupada had taken a group of devotees, the devotees that were at that time called the World Sankirtan Party. And, they had toured in India, and then he took them to Vrindavan. And in the month of Kartik, he sat in the courtyard of Rupa Goswami's Bhajan Kutir and Samadhi and gave class every evening in Nectar Devotion. So it's a celebrated, series, Nectar Devotion series. And then, during the daytime, he took them to different places around Vrindavan. If I'm not mistaken, that was Kartik 74. Might have been Kartik 73. So the Mayapur festival, Mayapur Vrindavan festival happened shortly thereafter, a few months thereafter. And I remember very clearly being taken to different places by Guru Das, who was with that group. And he was, he showed us this place and that place and told us the stories that Prabhupada had told him. And I remember very clearly seeing Prabhupada's rooms for the first time at Radha Damodar Temple. And they looked the same then as they look today. But, the courtyard today looks different. And, we did whatever all the pilgrims do. Then there's not like a big sea of people like today. Circumambulating, the deities by going around where the samadhis are, Jiva Goswami Samadhi and all those other samadhis, and then around the back side of the temple, and over on the far right corner is Bhugarbha Goswami Samadhi and Rupa Samadhi and Bhajan Kutir. So we did all that, but what was behind is not what's there today. What was behind was something like a big stone slab. And so you had to carefully step over that big stone slab. Now it's, cemented in or something. And Guru Das explained that because the geographic location of the Radha Damodar Temple was kind of central. Over there is Rupa Goswami's Govindaji, and over there is Radharaman, and over there was Madan Mohan. And so the Damodar Temple was central. So they would gather together, and especially in the summer, it's really hot. So they would stay in that shaded area on the backside of the temple underneath the stone slab, where it was cool. It's been a very hot day today. So you can think about it, going to a nice cool place, and they would sit together and discuss Krishna Katha. So as I'm reading these things, I'm thinking of that. What would it be like to sit at the feet, or what was it like for them to be together and discuss Krishna's pastimes in the way that they, alone can discuss Krishna's pastimes? Very deep, very profound, tasting the meanings of different words. Like this word can mean this. It can also be understood that way. It can be, the rasa was being chewed and tasted, and they were sharing with one another. So what I appreciate about doing this, although it's just reading, it's not just reading. It's hearing from our great acharyas, let's say our destination. If our aspiration is to achieve Krishna's association once again in Goloka Vrindavan, what's it like there? What's the travel advertisement? What's the marketing for that journey? And then you can save up your pennies and, get in a Vaikuntha Vimana and go there. It's described when Krishna went to Vrindavan, Krishna promised he would return, and according to Padma Purana, he returned. Jiva Goswami and the others confirm again. After killing Dhenukasura, Krishna went to Vrindavan. He changed from his Dwaraka, princely attire, and he donned his Gopal, cowherd boy attire. And he still looked, although his age was, over 100 years old, he looked like 16. So when he came to Vrindavan looking like 16, dressing like a cowherd boy, they were so happy. And, there's many ways of describing what happened, but along with satisfying the feelings of separation of all the residents of Vrindavan, one of his arrangements was to arrange for his pastimes in Vrindavan to be concluded, which meant a few different things. Those who were incarnations of demigods or partial incarnations were sent back to the heavenly realm. And those that were manifesting the manifest pastimes or Prakat Lila, their forms entered into the uppercut stage. They were just withdrawn from visible sight. But the eternal pastimes of Krishna are going on in Vrindavan. Then it's also said in Padma Purana that a Vaikuntha Vimana descended and took all the residents of Vrindavan to Goloka. So they entered an unmanifest state. Some expansions of them, it returned to Goloka Vrindavan. And Krishna was with them in the unmanifest and go back to Goloka version. And then another expansion of Krishna returned to Dwaraka to finish his Dwaraka pastimes. Now one of the commentaries says that actually this explanation that a Vaikuntha Vimana descended was to trick materialistic people. Like he had to go somewhere. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to. He's in Goloka Vrindavan. Doesn't have to go to Goloka Vrindavan. Or it's something like the description in Srimad Bhagavatam when after killing Shalva, this is just appreciating like how Krishna does what he does. After killing Shalva, I was outside the city of Dwarka, because when Shalva came to attack Krishna left the city of Dwarka so they could fight, so the Yadus would not be harmed, and he finished Shalva. Narad Muni showed up right where this happened. He hadn't returned yet to Dwarka, and he told them what Dantavakra was up to, because Dantavakra was seeking revenge, because one of his buddies was Shishupal. Shishupal had recently been killed also. So he was seeking revenge. And he's on his way to Mathura. So it's described, unseen by anyone, instantly the chariot arrived, and instantly the chariot took him to Mathura. To go by any transportation from Dwarka to Mathura, it takes a long time. But Krishna doesn't need a chariot. But he, gave the horses and the chariot driver some service, and they took him. And the same thing is described when Krishna left Mathura to go to Dwarka. Jarasandha was attacking for the 18th time when he went up this mountain, and Jarasandha couldn't find him, so he put fire all around and burned the mountain, and Krishna and Balaram jumped. And it's a big mountain. You know how big the mountain was? 11 yojanas. 11 times 8 miles. Ever seen a mountain that big? Have you seen a mountain that's 8 miles? No such thing. 11 times 8. They climbed up the mountain, jumped off the mountain. And unseen by others, a chariot came, 2 chariots, and took them off to Dwarka, in a jiffy. So they are in Dwarka. I mean, the same thing of Krishna building, when the 2 armies, Jarasandha and Kalyavana's army came, Balaram, you hold them off, I'm going to take every... So he built the whole city of Dwarka, took everybody there, settled them in their places of living. How long does that take? And then came back to meet Kalyavana. For Krishna, time and space are very flexible. It's like an accordion or something. Something that can become really big or really small. One time Prabhupada was asked, how did Krishna, when the pastime of Kaliya, serpent, took place, how far is Nandagram from, the Krishna Balaram temple? Because the Krishna Balaram temple and where the Kaliya Ghat is, they're very close. So to go from Kaliya Ghat to Nandagram, how far? That's by car. And the cowherd boys and the cows got there before Krishna did. It's coming up in this chapter 15. And they, it was early in the morning, and the pastime took all day long. And somebody went back and got Nanda and Jasoda, and they came, and Krishna is still in the coils of the Kaliya serpent. How'd they travel those distances? Somebody asked Prabhupada in such a short time. No, the answer that Prabhupada gave is similar but different. He said, Vrindavan is like a lotus. Sometimes the petals expand, sometimes they contract. When the petals contract, the distance becomes less. But time and space are quite flexible. He's not bound by material, restrictions of time and space. He moves according to his will. And things move according to his will. Because he's the supreme controller, and he's having pastimes. When everyone was in big anxiety, Balaram, at the Kaliya pastime coming up, Balaram was just smiling because he knew Krishna was just having fun. And the others are, because they have their relationship. But the parental affection, no way are they going to say, just smile and say, oh, he's having fun. He's in the coils of the Kaliya serpent. Anyway, the display of the entering into, what makes us eligible to enter into Krishna's pastimes? We can say, just chant Hare Krishna and we'll go into Krishna's pastimes. But there's got to be a little bit more than just chant Hare Krishna, because we're chanting Hare Krishna. And this so something about the quality of our chanting, and it's also something about the quality of our hearing, and hearing about Krishna's pastimes, especially from such qualified persons as our great Acharya commentators, the Goswamis and Vishwanath Chakravarti and others, to give us like a really close-up picture of what Krishna looks like when he returns from the forest, and how does that strike the heart of the elders? How does it strike the heart of the gopis? What are they feeling? How are they expressing themselves? The loving exchange, how Krishna approves of their loving dealings. it's part of our journey to rejoin Krishna's eternal pastimes in the spiritual world. Is hearing Harikatha along with Nam Sankirtan. The two go together. So let's see if there's some discussion. I've been speaking a bunch and reading a bunch. And by the way, come on. I'm going to come on time, and even if people aren't here on time, I'm going to begin on time because that's me. And I understood this evening, locally people don't come on time. I'll come on time and I'll start on time. So if you want to come late, that's okay, but we're going to start on time. So let's see if there's some discussion. Now we have some online people. Do we have a portable microphone or no? We do. Okay. So anybody, any thoughts or comments or questions, anything? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I would like to know who Vrishnis are, how they are related to Krishna.
Vrishnis?
Yes.
It's just, it's a detail which I haven't sorted out, but it's from the same dynasty. The terminology is Vrishni, Andaka, and Yadu. So my understanding is from King Yadu, there were some sons, the Vrishnis and the Andakas. That's my understanding. So they're just of the same family dynasty, from the same lineage. They're not exactly the same, but the same. If it's important to you, I'll spend some time and sort it out. I've done it in the past. I have problems with all those who's who and stuff. There's a chart that gives the family tree, and I'll look at the chart, and if it makes him sense, I'll forward it, and he can send it to you and to others. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. As we go deeper into this chapter 15, it is like two things appear. Are we even eligible to even hear this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even if we are eligible, the thought process we get, like the conscious, where what we see or what we are trying to execute is to see how to please Krishna.
Yeah.
And where do we stand in this? Like when we see Gopas playing, are we part of those Gopas playing with them? Or so
No.
those kind of feelings
No.
will come. Is it like,
No, we're not part of the Gopas. I mean, at this stage, we're just admiring, we're observers, admiring the depth of their love. So let's go to Shukadeva Goswami, and we're not at Shukadeva Goswami's position, but when he's narrating about the Gopas, he's astonished, and it describes how, in the midst of describing what they do and the exchanges with Krishna, he asks, "Who are these boys? And what lifetimes of pious activities have they undergone?" And then he compares them to yogis and compares them to great devotees, but they're beyond great devotees because they're playing with Krishna. Great devotees worship Krishna according to the vidhis and the rules and procedures. And these boys, they're rolling with him and wrestling with him and putting food in his mouth and so that's Shukadeva Goswami, and we're depending upon where we are in our spiritual trajectory, we can consider how fortunate, how intimate is life with Krishna. And, you know, it may, in one sense, it's like, wow, that's so far away from anything where I am. On the other hand, you know, it's according to what Rupa Goswami writes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's stimulating our ecstatic love for Krishna. So we're eligible to have our ecstatic love for Krishna stimulated. And if it works properly, then it's impetus for us to do our sadhana better so that we become sufficiently qualified to experience and relish even more completely. Here's a little comparison. It's definitely not the same, but there's a comparison is, from my experience as a young brahmachari engaging in book distribution, it was really austere. I mean, it had its joy, but it certainly had its austerity. And one of the things that book distribution did, besides making one learn the art of humility, was really important to chant good japa and hear the morning, you take part in the morning program in the temple really seriously, because that's where the strength came from to do the devotional activity of distributing books, which was really challenging. So my point is, the service inspires the impetus to do sadhana better. Similarly, hearing inspires us to do our sadhana better. It can work the other way. One can feel discouraged, oh, it's too far away, forget it. Let me hang up my hat and take a walk. Or one can go the other direction and just be, imagining I can become a gopi, or I can become a cowherd boy, and just, in dreamland. So those two extremes aren't wholesome. But the wholesome is, it's an impetus to let me do my sadhana more and more attentively, so that the qualification will come that I can actually relish, like, let's say, Shukadev. Shukadev was relishing in his way, Uddhava was relishing in his way, Brahma was relishing in his way, and those three examples, they're so elevated. Two of them are Mahajans. And they're looking at the Brijbasis going like, how fortunate are they? And Brahma's prayer, how are you going to repay them? So it helps to stimulate the deeper spiritual feelings, affections for Krishna by hearing these characteristics and qualities. It's stimulations of ecstatic love, which is an inspiration for us to do our sadhana more, strongly, better.
Thank you.
In the back?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. Maharaj, my question is how to become, I have read from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sistastakam, in that, like, how to be less than a blade of a grass, how to go in that position, how to feel that.
It's a feeling. It's not you become, but it's a feeling. And it's a profound humility. So how do you enter into the state of profound humility? That's the question. Well, there's stages, but the procedure, although there's stages, is hearing about those that have profound humility. Then you have an understanding of what profound humility looks like. You may not have an understanding of what it feels like, but you have an understanding of what it looks like. Once you have, so examples of that profound humility, just because it recently took place, Sanatana Goswami's disappearance took place. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, he went all the way to Ramakeli just to meet them. There were other pretexts for his going that direction, but here's Puri and there's Vrindavan, and he went to Ramakeli. He went to see them, and when he saw them, their exhibition of humility was so profound. Mahaprabhu embraced them, and even when he got back to Puri, he was again speaking about how their humility impacted him so much. He's the personality of Godhead, but so you find persons either in scripture or in real life or combination that have genuine humility like that. Not the lip deep, but genuine humility, and hear about them. What I'm saying now is from Ramanujacharya. I like this teaching. You hear about them, you remember them, you talk about them, you read about them, you remember them, and gradually that quality slowly becomes your quality. Your question is how to develop that quality of profound humility. Hear about those and remember those and serve them. Even you're not physically going to associate with them, but you serve them. And you serve them by taking their instructions, bringing them inside, understanding their mood and their mission, and serve their mood and their mission. And that's how that humility comes. It's a spiritual quality. Here's an important embellishment to what I just said. It's in Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's writing, and it's in Uddhava Gita. In Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's writing, he lists 26 principal qualities of a devotee. Krishna lists 28. And in both lists, there's one primary characteristic or Swarup Lakshana, and all the others are secondary characteristics that are derived from that primary characteristic. And that primary characteristic in Rupa Goswami's writings is Krishna Eka Sharana. Anyway, taking full shelter in Krishna, and that's all good qualities come, including humility, because you can't take shelter without being humble. They're not being proud and taking shelter are not consistent. It doesn't happen. There's no such thing. So to take full shelter, I have to let go of my false sense of prestige and pride. And you're striving to do like that, Krishna will help you. And one of the ways Krishna will help you is smash you. But it's not like, it's not that's the only way. Krishna doesn't necessarily have to do that. But so you strive by glorifying, hearing that quality and appreciating those that have that quality, etc. Associating with a person by the process of hearing and chanting and serving. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavad Pranam. Maharaj, how do we keep ourselves motivated spiritually in a difficult time? So,
fantastic.
So sometime in, like, when we are keep doing devotional service, one way or other, we build subconsciously that Krishna will take care. And many times it happens, like, from our eyes, it looks like Krishna didn't take care.
We're projecting our expectations upon Krishna. He's an order supplier. He's all powerful and he's all merciful. And here's my requisition slip. This is what mercy is going to look like. And what doesn't happen, in fact, it looks like it's just the opposite. I mean, your question, when I leave here, I'm going to Atlanta. And I gave a list of topics. And of the list of topics, 3 of them are very similar to this one question, and they were all selected. Meaning, it's universal. And it's not easy to understand because it looks like something it is and it isn't something that it looks like. Because we're expecting mercy is going to be like, material happiness, or what our idea of what happiness is, which is material happiness. And Krishna's idea of what happiness is not material happiness. And so sometimes, not always, but sometimes, there's many things to say, but here's 2 things. There's many things to say. Brahma Samhita verse has an answer. Yas tvindra gopamatavendra maho svakarma. You know the verse? Bandhanurupam palabhajanam atunoti karma nirdahitu kintu cha bhakti bhajam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. 2 parts. Govinda gives to everyone their appropriate karma, from Indra down to Indragopa. Those are for those that aren't devotees. Karma rules. So bad things happen to people because of karma, and good things happen to people because of karma, and they're both bad because it's karma. They're bound to the laws of karma, birth after birth. Then Bhakti Bhajam, those who are engaged in devotional service, Krishna has a different set of rules. And the different set of rules is Krishna, seeing that someone, you or somebody, has a desire to connect with him, yet there's still this affinity for being an enjoyer apart from Krishna. You'd say, you call it different things, material desire, something. Residual tendencies, call it, different names, ways to describe. But Krishna sees that. So in Bhakti Siddhanta language, sometimes through the fire of ordeal, Krishna removes from the root, namely, the root, he says 2 things. Essentially, materialistic endeavors and sinful activity. So the tendency to be an enjoyer, Krishna removes it through the fire of ordeal. And when the ordeal is going on, it's not yummy. It's like, hey, it's not how the playbook is supposed to be written. It's supposed to be, I become a devotee and Krishna makes things nice. And that's Krishna's protection, is he makes things nice. And I'm trusting that Krishna is going to protect me. But wait a minute. I'm going through this hard time. And not only a little bit. Sometimes it's a lot. And sometimes it's overwhelming. And sometimes it's like not just me and everything around me. Without the variety of calamities in this world is like a lot. And sometimes it's like, how are you going to handle it? So then why? That's why is it going on like this? Krishna went to sleep or something, or maybe I made a big offense or something. maybe it's a bad person and I'm undeserving of. So there's all those doubts. But one way, there's many things to say on this topic, but one thing to say is Krishna is showing his kindness by pulling from the very root the tendency to continue on in material existence. He's leaving only his shelter. It's a little bit, the Sanatana Goswami story, when he was going to visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu traveling through Jharkhand forest. He drank water where he shouldn't have, and he contracted a disease, the wet itches. You know that story? Okay. Well, Krishna arranged it, and Krishna checkmated him. I mean, their steps are very lovely, but time doesn't permit all the steps. It's so lovely. You read this section, it's lovely. Sanatana Goswami's journey to Puri. He was thinking from the very beginning, from the very first meeting, Lord Chaitanya embraced he and Rupa. The next time they met, he embraced Rupa and Sanatana. And then when Sanatana escaped and he was dressed like a Muslim, he embraced him. And everyone was like, what? He loved him very dearly. So Rupa knew, or Sanatana knew, he's going to embrace me. And I got this yucky stuff all over, smelly sores. I'm going to give up my life. Because I can't have this yucky, smelly stuff smearing on Lord Chaitanya's body. So he had this idea. I'll stay until Rath Yatra. When Rath Yatra comes, I'll throw myself under the Rath cart wheels. I'll give up my body. He didn't say anything to anybody. Lord Chaitanya told him, you can't do that. Without having said anything. He said, if that you can go back to Godhead by doing that, let's go. But that's not how you go back to Godhead. You can't do that. And then so many other steps and steps and steps and steps. He was gotten the advice from Jagatananda. After Rath Yatra, go back to Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya said, who is this Jagatananda giving you advice? You're worshipable by him and he's giving you advice? Anyway, you can't give up your body. I have plans for that body. You surrender to me, the body belongs to me, and I have plans. So, many, many, many things happened in the course of his stay in Puri, where he just couldn't do anything except one thing. And Lord Chaitanya embraced him, and the sores went away. It was like a miracle cure. And Haridas Thakur witnessed it. And he said, you are such a recipient of Lord Chaitanya's mercy. He put you through all this ordeal for one thing. You had no other shelter but him. He's so kind to you. He didn't do that to me. He did it to you because you're the recipient of his greatest mercy. He loves you so much. Now, we're not being embraced by Lord Chaitanya, etc., but we are put through ordeals sometimes, and there's a purpose. So read, it's a very short purport. Just Twinda Gopamata Vendra Mahosvakarma, it's right there. And Govinda is involved with you when you're going through some ordeal. He's there. Now, if you're not attached to him, you're attached to the rock that was thrown at you and the pain that it caused when it hit you and the person that threw it. You get absorbed in the temporary. Whether it's an illness or something, or something. Somebody did something hurtful, or somebody died of something, or somebody's going through some, the world is full of varieties of that. It's a different rule for the devotee. It's not a karma thing. Here's a second the bigger picture. Prabhupada spoke about this often. Criminals are not killed, generally, unless there's murderers. They're put in jail. And what's jail like? It's not nice. It's not designed to be nice. So here we are, and it's not nice. It's to teach us. It's not nice. I'm a devotee, but I have to take responsibility, not karmically, but the tendency for misuse of free will. And it's not nice. So when we find that it's not nice, it's just verification. It's not nice. But in the spiritual world, there's this kind of other utopian, mistaken idea that Vaikuntha means no. Does Mother Jasoda and Nanda Maharaj have anxiety about Krishna? Parental affection? But it's not material anxiety, it's a spiritual anxiety. It intensifies their love for Krishna. So when we go through stuff, or someone dear to you is going through stuff, it's a nice devotee, then how are you to understand your or their situation and console them? The nurturing of faith is the essence of friendship. A real friend is one that connects you with Krishna or strengthens your faith in Krishna. Being someone's best friend is that. There's other parts to it. The holistic picture of self. You're supportive of the holistic, but at the heart is the connection with Krishna. So we're learning lessons that it was a big mistake, and here we are paying the price for who many knows how long, how many consistent misuses of free will for how many lifetimes. I take responsibility for that, and it's not, the consequences are not nice. I've become a devotee, and so it starts with tang satiksha swabharata, and in the mature stage, here's an opportunity to deepen my attachment for Krishna, and to consider, despite whatever the dhira is one who remains undisturbed even when there's cause of disturbance. My opportunity in the face of disturbance is to stay attached to Krishna. And how to do that and contemplate that. The circumstance is pulling you this way and that way. And I'm going to stay attached to Krishna. I'm not there yet, but I'm going to stay there. I'm going to strive like that. So it's an opportunity in a prison house. And when the prison supervisor sees here's a person that's, they've undergone correction, then they have more freedom. And eventually set free. That's another way of describing, a way that Prabhupada often would describe material existence. It's to help us understand, even you're a practicing, sincere, good devotee, or somebody that you know, and here's the circumstance. I like that purport, fire of ordeal. It says a lot. And in the course of many years, I've gathered many quotes from different sources, Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta and the Bhagavatam and this and that. There's a whole file, a doc file on how to see those circumstances. And here's another one. Gratitude. Even in difficult circumstances. That's the title of one of the presentations I'm doing in Atlanta that I did just before coming here too. Gratitude. including during difficult times. This is something that's, when the heart connection is there, the external can be whatever the external is. And sometimes it's duality. Sometimes and sometimes. Not only one thing, it's sometimes and sometimes. So don't be attached to the sometimes. Don't be attached to the duality. You deal with it. You engage with it in appropriate manner, whatever it is, this way, that way. But your focus is that connection with Krishna, and had to receive that connection with Krishna. That's the greatest gift from the best friend, Prabhupada. And and all of us who are products of that mercy. How great was that compassion of our founder Acharya? He was driven by that compassion, by the order of his spiritual master, but it was also his heart. I just listened today to, in the last few days actually, to an interview of Balavanta, Prabhupada disciple who was a GBC. And he told the story that he started to cry as he was telling the story. And I almost I didn't know the story before. When Prabhupada was trying to go back to the West from Vrindavan, he got as far as London, but Balavanta had been Prabhupada's servant for that period of time. And he was sent back to America because he's born in Atlanta. The president at that time was Jimmy Carter, who was from Georgia. And through that relationship, he knew somebody that was in immigration department in Washington and could make arrangements for Prabhupada. Given his physical condition, the Prabhupada wouldn't have to go through customs, wouldn't have to go through immigration. They could just, sign a document and put him in a limousine and take him to his destination. And Balavanta arranged all that. And once it was all finalized, he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was with Prabhupada in London. He told, it's all set. Now, Prabhupada didn't go, but in this interview with Kaunteya, he said it was all arranged, and Tamal informed Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just cried. And Balavanta couldn't speak anymore. No, he was difficult times, and your heart melts because you're in service to a great personality. And the personalities that Prabhupada was serving was his disciples, who were, nutcase people, people that knew nothing about nothing. And now he has such affection for them that they're making all these arrangements for him. And knowing that they have that love for him, he's crying. You can face anything. When your heart is full, you can face anything, the hardship, the reversal, and all those things. It's a very powerful force. Gratitude is a very powerful force. So that's the title of the topic. Gratitude during difficult times.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Do we have online anything? No? Okay. I think it looks like we're done. Oh, there's something in the back.
No.
There is a question in the back.
There's a question. Sorry.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question may be kind of like a big question.
Kind of a which question?
A big question, a very
Base?
big.
Big.
but
Big question.
yeah. My question is, what made Uddhava so exceptional that there's a book dedicated to his teachings?
Book. It's sections of the Bhagavatam, and there's family connection. Arjuna and Krishna were cousins, right? Arjuna's mother and Krishna's father were brother and sister, so they were cousins. And Uddhava's father and Krishna's father were brothers, so they were cousins. But it wasn't just the family, they were constantly. From the time that Krishna went to Mathura from Vrindavan until he left the world, they were constant, they were inseparable. Except for the little journey that he made to Vrindavan. Krishna sent him as his representative. They were always together. At the end of that section of Uddhava Gita, 11th canto, Krishna says, more dear to me than Arjuna, more dear to me than grandfather Bhishma, more dear to me than the goddess of fortune, more dear to me than even myself is you, Uddhava. It's a verse right in Uddhava Gita. And so what was the qualification? It wasn't just family relation, it was his love. Now, the residents of Vrindavan had even such intense love that Uddhava said, let me take birth in Vrindavan to get some dust from their feet. But outside of Vrindavan, he's the most exalted of all of Krishna's devotees because the intensity of his love. And there's love and friendship. Service intensified by the friendship. That was his qualification. So if you want to think about, humility, think about Uddhava, he's a good one. Sanatana Rupa Goswami, they're good ones. And hear about them, the kind of humility that they had. That was special. Okay, so I have some Mahaprasadam. I'm going to give out some Mahaprasadam. Srila Prabhupada ki.